Hello everyone, welcome back to another video and welcome to Nahida's debut video. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Nahida's kit, look at the ways to build her, and also testing her out. Before we get started, if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like, subscribe for more content. Now let's get right into the video. First, let's look into her skill set. She is a catalyst user, which means her normal charge attacks will deal dendro damage. When looking at her elemental skill, called All Schemes to Know, it has two functions, a hold and a tap function. When you hold her elemental skill, it makes her go into this aiming mode, kind of like using a camera, and basically allows you to scan enemies, putting a mark on them. This mark is called Seed of Skanda. The mark will be attached to enemies, and all the enemies that have this mark will be connected, and whenever you deal reaction damage or dendro core damage to the enemies that are marked, all the enemies at the same time will be hit with dendro damage and also applying dendro on top of it. A total of 8 enemies max can be applied with this mark, and whenever you proc this effect, it can be activated again within a short period of time. Try combat purification damage that scales off her attack, but mostly her elemental mastery, so it does have double scaling. The interval that the Tri-Combat Purification can be triggered is 2.5 seconds. The duration that the mark lasts is 25 seconds. And the cooldown for tapping the E is 5 seconds, while the hold is 6 seconds, so a 1 second different. We're moving on to her elemental burst. Her burst spawns a field called Shrine of Maya, where it doesn't really do anything, but it gives buffs to Nahida's kit that are based on the elemental types of your party members, where each of these buffs have a total of 2 stacks, where if you have 2 characters of that elemental type. If a party member is Pyro, it increases the damage that Tri-Combat Purification deals. If a party member is Electro, then it decreases the time interval that Tri-Purification can be triggered. And if a party member is Hydro, then it increases the field duration of the burst. Here are the stats for the burst at level 6. The burst has a base duration of 15 seconds and a cooldown of 13.5 seconds, with an energy cost of 50. And now moving on to her passives. Her first one, called On All Things Meditated, basically allows you to scan harvestable items in the open world without having to pick them up, which is actually a pretty cool passive if you ask me. Her second passive, called Compassion Illuminated. Basically, whenever you proc her burst, it has the following effects. The elemental mastery of the active character within this field will be increased by 25% of the elemental mastery of the party member with the highest elemental mastery, and the maximum of elemental mastery you can gain from this is a total of 250. In her third passive, called Awakening Elucidated, each point of Nahida's elemental mastery beyond 200 will grant 0.1% bonus damage and 0.03 crit rate to Tri-Combat Purification from her elemental skill. A maximum of 80% bonus damage and 24% crit rate can be granted to Tri-Combat Purification in this way. For talent priorities, I highly suggest you prioritize her E, because that's going to be kind of where a majority of her damage is going to come from, so I definitely recommend doing that. If you're going to be playing Nahida on field, then you may want to consider leveling up her autos, because her autos could do a good amount of damage. If she's going to be off field, then you could potentially want to level up her burst talents, because the buffs are pretty good and you do want to prioritize using those buffs. I'm going to quickly talk about constellations, because I know some people are wanting to post some constellations on Nahida, so I'm going to give my opinion on which constellations are the best to go for and which is a good stopping point. Her first constellation basically allows you to have one additional stack from one of the buffs of the elemental types based on your party members. For example, if you have one Pyro on your team, then you get an additional stack, meaning you'll be able to get all 2 stacks from that buff. This constellation basically allows you to run a team comp where if you have one Pyro, one Electro, and one Hydro, then you basically get all the buffs at all stacks, which is kind of good, but like I feel like a lot of people are gonna not run that team comp specifically. I feel like a majority of people are gonna run either double Electro, double Hydro. I don't think a lot of people are gonna run Pyro with Nahida a lot, so it seems good, but realistically it's not really gonna be that useful in a lot of team comps. Moving on to her second one, which I think is gonna be the stopping point for constellations. If you are planning on rolling for constellations for Nahida, her second constellation basically allows any of the reactions applied by Nahida, that includes Burning, Bloom, Hyper Bloom, Burgeon, reaction damage, can score critical hits, and their crit rate and crit damage are fixed at 20% and 100% respectively. The second effect from her C2 is that when enemies are affected by Quicken, Aggravate, or Spread, their defense is decreased by 30%. C3 is just an increased level for her elemental skill. C4 basically allows Her C4, whenever her elemental skill is applied to enemies, it increases her elemental mastery at different stacks. C5 is just increased level for her elemental burst, and her C6 basically allows her to deal more damage if she's on field while the opponents are applied with the mark from her elemental skill. Honestly, I think the good place to stop if you are rolling for constellations is C2, but I think it's only worth to go for constellations if you are planning to go C2. I don't think C1's worth it. I mean, it is nice to I guess get the max stacks of one of the elemental type buffs, but honestly, in a lot of team comps, it's not really gonna be that useful. So I don't think it's worth going for Constellation 1. I think it's only worth going if you're gonna go for C2, because C2 is pretty nice, defense decrease, and also the other buff effective for bloom reactions and burning and stuff. I think it's kind of pretty good, so only go for C2 if you're planning to roll for constellations on Nahida. Moving on to weapon choices. So for me, I am going to be using sacrificial fragments in this debut video, but for catalysts that you may want to potentially use for your Nahida, for 5 stars, I think her best in slot is going to be the new Dendro catalyst that just come out and that is on banner right now. I think that is her best in slot, but I don't think it's that great compared to her other options. Her second 5-star option is Kagura's Rarity, mainly because it gives you crit damage, and also she can utilize the passive if she's going to be on field. Another option that you could consider in terms of 5-star is Lost Prayer, because it gives you crit rate, and also I guess you can utilize the passive if Nahida is going to mainly be on field. That's really only it, but I don't think it's going to be that great compared to the 4-star options, where 1, Sacrificial Fragments, 2, Withsit, that gives you crit damage, and also it gives you a really huge buff from the passive. The only thing about this weapon that I don't really like is that it is 1 rotational, meaning that the buff doesn't really last that long and the cooldown is very long. So if you really want to use Nahida in a 1 rotation comp, then this weapon could be very useful for you. But if you want a weapon that's more flexible and more easy to use, then you could look at an option like Sacrificial Fragments, or a free-to-play option like the Maple Mare, which is the Mondstadt craftable catalyst. It gives you elemental mastery as the main stat, and it also gives you an elemental damage bonus from the passive. The only other 4-star option that you could consider if you don't like any of those options is the Favonius Codex, mainly because it's a really good weapon in terms of giving energy for your teammates. Another option you could consider if you're planning to play Nahida on field that could be good is the Solar Pearl, mainly because it increases your elemental skill damage by a considerable amount, and it could also increase your normal attack damage as well. When looking at artifact choices, her best in slot is going to be Deep-Wooded Memories, because it gives her Dendro damage bonus and it also decreases Dendro resistance of enemies. The second set you could consider is Gilded Dreams, mainly because the 2-piece set gives you a lot of elemental mastery and also a lot more elemental mastery from the 4-piece set. The reason Deep-Wood Memories is going to be her best in slot is because of the 4-piece passive, and also Gilded Dreams may not be as good as Deep-Wood Memories, because let's say if you were to give her a lot of elemental mastery, Deep-Wood is just going to be her best in slot. But the thing is, the difference between Deep-Wood and Gilded is not going to be as significant, to the point where it's not going to be a huge loss if you were to put her on Gilded Dreams if you do not have a good 4-piece set of Deep-Wood Memories. And considering that these 2 artifact sets are in one domain, it makes it a lot easier to farm one of these sets for her. So in the end, I recommend you putting her on one of these sets on whichever set you have the best artifacts on. Another thing to keep in mind, if you don't have any good artifacts, considering this domain is kind of new, you could also put her on a 2-piece set like 2-piece Dendro damage and 2-piece elemental mastery, or double 2-piece elemental mastery, whichever one is good. Just make sure the artifacts that you give her are good artifacts to begin with. In this debut video, these are the artifacts that I will be running on her. But when discussing substats to focus on your artifacts, I would say the main substat you want to focus on is elemental mastery, but the secondary stat you want to also focus on is also crit damage or crit rate. Considering that you do get crit rate for her elemental skill from her passive, you could leeway away from getting crit rate from your substats, but depending on how much substats you get, it also doesn't hurt to go for a little bit more crit rate if you are not able to get as much elemental mastery. When talking about main stats for her Sands, Goblet, and Circlet, I know a lot of people are going to think about going triple EM, but that may not be the best case for some people. I think going triple EM is only ideal if you have good substats on all 3 of your pieces. If you have good substats on your circlet, goblet, sands, then going triple EM could be ideal. But one thing to keep in mind, you don't want to hit over 1000 EM, you want to stay under 1000, because once you reach over 1000 EM, all of the elemental mastery you have over 1000 is basically wasted. So going triple EM if you are using an elemental mastery weapon may not be as ideal than going for dendro damage from your goblet or crit stats for your circlet. For me, I'm going to be going elemental mastery for both my sands and goblet, but I'm going to go for crit damage on my circlet. And considering elemental mastery is one of the hardest stats to go for a main stat on an artifact, it's highly likely you're not going to have as much good elemental mastery pieces than, let's say, a dendro damage piece or a crit damage circlet. So the best way to go is either going double elemental mastery, and for one of the pieces being dendro damage from either your goblet or a crit stat circlet. If you're going to be playing Nahida on field, then you don't really need that much energy requirement. But if you are going to play your Nahida off field, which is what I'm going to be using my Nahida mostly, then you do want her to have some good energy recharge from your substats. I would say around 35 to 40% if you are to have that much from your substats. That's all I have to say about artifacts, and now moving on to the gameplay showcase, where I will be showcasing Nahida in many different team comps that she could be useful in, and towards the end I will be giving my thoughts on what I think about Nahida as a character and see if she is a worth pulling character. So without further ado, here is the showcase.
Ready to apply.
I will have order.
Make yourselves at home. Right now, emerge. Now you shall perish. Show them. Right now. I see everything. Yeah. The Temple of Wisdom. I'm getting sick. Emerge right now. Inazuma shines eternal.
Crumble. I will have order.
Everyone hold hands. The Temple of Wisdom. Emerge right now. Nothing lasts forever. Right here, right now. Torn to oblivion.
Rise. This is order.
Sharing my knowledge. Right here, emerge. Shine down. Now you shall perish. I see everything. Sharing my knowledge. Busted. Game's up. Fun's over. Teamwork is strict.
Nowhere to run. Your sins weigh upon your soul. Guilty. Is Genshin dead?
Gotcha. Everyone hold hands. The Temple of Wisdom. Here comes the catch. Going in.
Through me, justice is served. Their penance is due. Guilty. Their penance is due. Mine
To apply.
new hunting.
I see everything. Sharing my knowledge.
Supporting fire. Don't get too close.
Everybody stand back.
Be still.
I'm getting sick of this.
Fire it up.
Let's light it up. The Temple of Wisdom. Teamwork is strict.
I got you covered. Cascade.
And that is my Nahida showcase. I hope you guys enjoyed it. After playing with her in many different team comps, I have my final thoughts on her. Honestly, I think she's a really good unit because just based on how she works, I think she's really good. Just the fact that you're able to apply Dendro on field and also off field, I think that's the main thing that she's really useful in, is the fact that she's a really good off-field Dendro applier that makes her really stand out compared to the other Dendro characters that we have. And also the usefulness of her elemental skill, allowing you to scan enemies that you would want to choose over compared to other enemies that could be in a different position from where your character is. And I think the procs with her elemental skill on top of the elemental type buff that she gets from her burst is also really good, because it really elevates a lot of aggravate teams, where it just makes her overall, I think, the best Dendro character in all of Genshin. Yes, Dendro is still really early as an element, and we don't have as much Dendro characters as there is to be, but just the fact that she elevates so many team comps this early in the beginning, I just think it's gonna be really hard to like top that off, unless we get a Dendro character that could be like a main on-field damage dealer. But overall, I enjoy her. I think she's a character worth pulling and a good character overall to have on your account. But again, that's just all what I have to say. I think she's a worth pulling character. What do you guys think of Nahida? Let me know in the comments below. And that's my Nahida debut video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please consider leaving a like, subscribe for more content in the future. Check me out on Twitch. The link will be in the description below. That's all for today, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Peace.